Aston Martin, the luxury car that James Bond turned into a legend. Some believe that a car is just a means of transportation, but one only needs to look at an Aston Martin to realize that this belief is, at the very least, naive, because deep down it was never just a car. It was, and continues to be, a silent symbol of power, charm, and strategic intelligence, the kind of presence that makes even those who don't understand engines feel that there's something different there. And perhaps that's exactly what's unsettling. How can an object carry more personality than many people we know? The curious thing is that few people realize the true paradox behind this brand. While others scream luxury with huge logos, Aston Martin does the opposite. It speaks softly, but is heard worldwide. And this touches on a pain that almost no one admits. The feeling that sometimes we make too much noise trying to prove our worth, when true power lies in the silence of those who know exactly who they are. The reward? Discovering that there is a type of elegance that doesn't need permission to be memorable. And when James Bond entered the story, everything changed. The encounter between a fictional agent and a real machine created a legend that transcended cinema, years, generations, and even logic. Today, the question isn't, why did Aston Martin become famous? But why hasn't any other car managed to take that place? And it is precisely this mystery that we are going to unravel now, step by step, as if we were opening a vault full of secrets that the general public never notices. The elegant origins of Aston Martin and the birth of an automotive myth. The story of Aston Martin begins like those ideas that arise over a hot cafe, when two visionaries decide that the world deserves something more sophisticated than merely functional cars. Lionel Martin and Robert Bamford realized, at the beginning of the 20th century, that driving shouldn't be a mechanical act, but an experience that blends elegance, power, and a touch of British rebellion. It's curious how legendary brands almost always are born this way, from a silent nonconformity. And honestly, every great project starts that way, when someone realizes there's room for something extraordinary. In its early models, Aston Martin didn't just want to compete. It wanted to show the world a stance, almost a manifesto, that luxury could be discreet, yet striking. It was the kind of vehicle someone would choose not to attract attention, but to communicate that they didn't need it. A simple parallel. It's like wearing a minimalist, high-quality watch. Only those who understand. And this subtle positioning ended up defining an entire culture around the brand, even before any appearance in Hollywood. But what's most fascinating is that, without even realizing it, the founders were paving the way for something much bigger than cars. They were creating a symbol that, decades later, would speak directly to the global imagination of power, strategy, and charm. And while that wasn't happening, every detail, every curve, and every philosophy put into the first cars prepared the ground for an encounter that would forever change the brand and pop culture. Something that would only be revealed at the right moment. But that began right here. The unexpected encounter between Aston Martin and James Bond. The truth is that not even Aston Martin itself imagined that one day it would cross paths with the most famous secret agent on the planet. It was almost an improbable alignment. The producers of James Bond were looking for a car that was not only beautiful, but that represented intelligence, presence, and that quiet charm that precedes a dangerous man. And, among several options, the DB5 simply, he spoke without speaking. There are encounters that seem like chance occurrences, but they change destinies, and this was one of them, as powerful as when someone finds a book that flips a switch in their mind, like Think and Grow Rich. Behind the scenes, the choice of car wasn't just aesthetic, it was strategic. Bond needed a vehicle that carried the aura of an elite British spy, and Aston Martin offered exactly that combination of elegance and impact. Remember when someone chooses an object and feels that it reflects their identity? Well, Bond and Aston Martin functioned like two pieces that always belong to the same puzzle. That's why so many fans, even today, automatically associate one with the other, as if they were born together. And what's most impressive is that this partnership began timidly, almost without fanfare, but quickly proved to be a game-changer. The car didn't appear as an extra. It entered the scene as the protagonist, as if it had its own personality. And this opened doors to something even bigger. After all, the public wasn't prepared for the impact a car could have when it comes to life on the big screen. And that's precisely where the story begins to take an even more surprising turn. The DB5. The car that became a character. The Aston Martin DB5 wasn't just a car in the film. It entered the scene as if it had received the script before everyone else. Its presence had a natural elegance, that combination of steel, curves, and sobriety that communicates power without raising its voice. Those who see it for the first time feel the same thing as someone smelling fresh coffee in the morning. It's familiar, it's striking, and at the same time, impossible to ignore. And, however exaggerated it may seem, the DB5 had something that many human characters lack: its own charisma. The most curious thing is that the DB5 was already a masterpiece before appearing in 007. But Hollywood did to it what happens to musicians who become famous after a song goes viral. The talent was already there. It just lacked the right spotlight. Its impeccable engineering, handcrafted finish, and iconic look created a combination that made the car instantly recognizable worldwide. A simple parallel would be that classic coat that transcends decades and remains stylish, while trends come and go. The DB5 has always been that timeless piece. And, of course, when the camera captured its details, the audience realized they weren't looking at an ordinary vehicle. The sound of the engine, the shine of the bodywork, and the way it moved in the scenes almost resembled a character with a soul of its own. It was as if the car was saying, "Get ready, because I also have tricks up my sleeve." And it is precisely about these tricks, ingenious, daring, and absurdly creative, that the story begins to gain a new level of fascination. Secret gadgets, where engineering and espionage meet. If there's one thing that truly made the audience's eyes widen, it was the audacity of the gadgets installed in the DB5. It wasn't just a car. It was practically a mobile vault of impossible tricks, created by the most refined British imagination and engineers who loved to test limits. From the ejector seat to the hidden machine guns, every detail seemed to say, "Technology can be elegant, yes." It's like those modern apps that seem simple, but solve half of life's problems. Only, of course, much more dangerous. These gadgets created a bridge between the real world and the world of cinematic espionage. And even knowing that none of that was available on the market, people began to look at luxury cars with a new layer of expectation. A practical example of this is how many technology professionals are inspired by these films to innovate. It's no coincidence that companies like Tesla emerged with ideas that previously only existed in movies. The truth is that Bond has always planted seeds in the collective imagination, some even becoming reality decades later. And the more these devices appeared on screen, the more the audience realized that the car wasn't an accessory. It was an accomplice. The presence of the gadgets gave the DB5 an active role in the plot, as if it had its own decisions, always ready to save the agent at the last second. And precisely for this reason, this chapter of the story prepares the ground for something bigger. The cultural impact that took Aston Martin from the cinema straight into people's imaginations and into the desire of the most discreet millionaires on the planet. The impact on pop culture and the luxury market. After the DB5's debut alongside Bond, something curious began to happen. The car ceased to be merely an automotive item and became a cultural symbol. It was as if each appearance on screen reinforced a silent message. This is for those who understand the value of refinement. And, just like certain perfumes that don't need aggressive advertising, Aston Martin became an automatic reference for understated power. The public didn't just see the car, they saw an entire lifestyle hidden within it. This impact was directly reflected in the luxury market. Suddenly, collectors began to treat the DB5 as a work of art, and ordinary buyers started dreaming of something similar, even if they would never acquire one. It's the same effect that brands like Rolex, Hermès, or even Rimowa provoke. It's not just about the object, but about what it represents. And this shows how, often, the symbolic value of something can far surpass its material value. A phenomenon that also occurs in the world of emotional investment, when someone buys something that tells a story. And while the car became a pop icon, Aston Martin itself discovered it possessed a priceless cultural capital. The brand name acquired a natural magnetism, as if its mere existence was already part of a larger narrative. And this new positioning paved the way for a completely different era in which the company would need to decide how to transform this cinematic legacy into real strength within the modern automotive market. The evolution of Aston Martin after Bond. With the global impact generated by the DB5, Aston Martin realized it couldn't simply continue making cars. It needed to build a lineage. And that's exactly what it did. The brand began incorporating more and more elements that reinforced that aura of strategic sophistication, almost as if each new model had received training from MI6. And while many automakers chased trends, Aston Martin remained true to its own DNA, something rare and valuable in the world of luxury. New models emerged, bringing greater power, more handcrafted interiors, and technologies that engaged with the modern world without losing their British essence. It's like when someone evolves, matures, modernizes, but remains recognizable to those who have always been around. The DB9, the Vanquish, and the Vantage, for example, came to be treated as natural successors to an almost royal lineage. In simple terms, each launch seemed to say, Bond may have changed, but the soul remains. Meanwhile, the brand developed strategic partnerships, invested in even more sophisticated engines, and expanded its presence among collectors and millionaires in the Middle East, the USA, and Europe. Aston Martin understood that it wasn't enough to have an icon in the past. It was necessary to keep the flame of exclusivity alive in the present. This careful expansion prepared the ground for the most intriguing point of this whole story. How a legacy created decades ago continues, to this day, to be the basis of a fascination that no other car has managed to reproduce. The enduring legacy, why even today no one surpasses the 007 aura of Aston Martin. What's fascinating is that, even with new technologies, new supercars, and brands emerging trying to reinvent luxury, Aston Martin still carries a glow that doesn't fade. It's like that old song that, when it plays, everyone recognizes and no one changes. Because it has history, soul, and presence. The 007 aura has become inseparable from the brand, creating an identity that transcends generations, from those who saw the first films to young people who only know Bond from internet memes. This enduring quality is rare, almost magical. The secret to this legacy lies in the combination of elegance, purpose, and storytelling. Aston Martin doesn't just sell cars, it sells the feeling of entering a world where charm and strategy go hand in hand. It's exactly the kind of product that doesn't need to shout to be heard. And that explains why millionaires, collectors, and motorsport enthusiasts continue to see the brand as a symbol of intelligent power, a subtle but decisive difference between luxury and ostentation. And perhaps the most interesting thing is to see how this aura continues to grow, even decades after the DB5's first appearance. Each new film, each special edition, each collector displaying their unique piece reinforces the idea that Aston Martin belongs to a universe where time doesn't wear down, it only polishes. And it is precisely when the story seems to be coming to an end that the big question arises. What does all this mean for those seeking to understand the true value of intelligent luxury? Ultimately, the Aston Martin story reminds us that what truly marks the world isn't what shouts loudly, but what carries purpose, essence, and intention. And perhaps that's the most transformative part for those of us here, realizing that each person also carries the potential to become unforgettable when they decide to live authentically and firmly, without needing to prove anything to anyone. The question is, are you driving your life like someone behind the wheel, or are you still letting others choose the path for you? If there's one thing the legacy of James Bond and Aston Martin teaches us, it's that elegance isn't about appearance, it's about attitude. So it's worth reflecting. What choices in your daily life communicate who you really are? What habits, decisions, or changes can you make today to build a stronger, more confident presence, and above all, one more aligned with what you want for the future? Sometimes a small action, reading a good book, reorganizing priorities, starting a project, is the equivalent of the first turn of the ignition key. Now tell me, what was the most powerful insight that this reflection sparked in you? What do you intend to apply first? Answer here in the comments, because I want to follow your progress and walk with you on this journey. And of course, if you want to continue learning about luxury, behavior, strategy, and everything that transforms the mind, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, each video is another step towards a more conscious, more powerful, and much more interesting life.